What's up, everybody? Just want to take a quick second and let people know that I am self-supported. I now put all of my episodes on Substack for paid subscribers. I put them up early, and then 24 hours later, I release them to the public on all my platforms. I also have Venmo, PayPal, Cash App, Buy Me a Coffee, Zelle, a P.O. Box, and Locals, Patreon. And all of these, all of the links are in the show notes of every single episode I put out. So look forward to continuing to, provide great conversations. And thank you all for your continued support. I love that I asked you right beforehand, hey, what do you want to talk about today? Like, we need to do this because, you're on so much. I haven't met you in person yet, Matt, but you're like one of my better, closest internet friends in relation to the show and how much we talk. So I asked you the question, and I'm like, why the hell did I even ask that? All right, let's go. Let's just jump into this. And
Sure.
There's a lot going on right now, and we were just starting to talk about this, and I was actually talking to a friend of mine the other day, and we got in a big disagreement about the militarization of the National Guard. And I think all these, it sounds good, on paper, like Chicago's a mess because they're potentially talking about doing this in Chicago. They've done it in D.C. New York and L.A. have also been mentioned, but I'm a cynic with all of it. Where does it end? This episode is brought to you by Vaulted. Launched by McIlvaney Financial Group. With Vaulted, I literally just tap a button and bam, I own physical gold stored in a professional vault. I can also take delivery at any time. Extremely simple and less expensive than any other method. The do-it-yourself way to buy precious metals. Click on the promo link in the show notes or go to vaulted.blbvux.net/coffeeandamike. Look at how easy this is. The Vaulted app on my phone, I can access it at any time.
Yeah, the using it in D.C. is kind of an exception because it is a federal district. It's the nation's capital. It's where the White House and Congress and Supreme Court are. So, Trump is on pretty good ground to essentially more than double the law enforcement footprint, on duty in Washington. And that seems to have obviously, suppressed the gang activity or just the urban street crime. But doing it in Chicago is a huge mistake. Pritzker has said he doesn't want it. The mayor doesn't want it. It's like volunteering to go into Fallujah, right? Or Mosul. It's just volunteering for it. I'm not the world's biggest fan of the late General Colin Powell. But he did, at the end, he admitted and he regretted being used in the whole WMD hoax in the Iraq war. But he had a couple of maxims or axioms that he had actually articulated, about when to go to war. He says, what's your exit strategy? What does victory look like? Define the victory. It's easy to go in. Define victory. When do you get out? And he also said, if you broke it, you bought it. So if Trump goes in and puts, Trump National Guard on the streets in Chicago, and it turns out to be a fiasco, which it can, then he owns it. He owns all the crime in Chicago after that point. And if you're going in where the mayor and the governor want to see you fail, right? They want to see you fail, just like they wouldn't cooperate with ICE. They would release prisoners out the back door, so to speak, so that the ICE wouldn't be able to pick them up. If you have the local Democrats working against you because they don't want your anti-crime program to succeed because you'll get credit, it's a disaster just waiting to happen. Then when do you say, okay, that's good, we have fixed crime in Chicago, which is ridiculous. It's like saying we're going to fix poverty in Africa. You can go in there with the best of intentions, the whole British Empire, we're going to fix Africa. And 2 centuries later, the empire leaves, Africa's as bad as ever, and all you've done is well, done an exercise in colonialism at the time, extract a lot of minerals and so forth. But in the case of Chicago, you're not going to fix the city by bringing in National Guard troops. And remember, the National Guard troops aren't just sitting around some barracks somewhere playing ping pong and darts, waiting for a call. These are guys that have jobs in the civilian world. So calling up the National Guard to rotate them into Chicago, like it's Fallujah or Mosul, it's, at what point are you going to say, are you going to declare victory and pull them out? What happens if people start taking pot shots at them just to aggravate the situation? Let's say cartel gang members don't appreciate that now you've got National Guard parked in front of all their projects where they're, doing drug deals. Then they just start taking pot shots from upper balconies, at what are you going to then send National Guard quick reaction forces to storm these buildings? I mean, what's the end of that? So I think that if Trump was smart, and in some ways he is, but in a lot of ways he's not, which we can discuss. I mean, he's not about Russia and Ukraine. He's not about mRNA vaccines, et cetera. But, for him to say we're going to send the National Guard into Chicago, then why not St. Louis, Baltimore? And where does it end? It ends with the United States occupying itself, and these National Guard troops are, out of their jobs while they're being called up. This isn't like it was a hurricane or a tornado or an earthquake. You're essentially volunteering to cure something that the Democrats don't and can't and won't cure. So you're going to go in against their wishes. They're going to only have a motivation to see you fail at it. So I think he should just make Washington, D.C. his little demonstration project of how crime can be reduced, but don't expand this to other cities. Huge mistake.
I often wonder if there's something bigger going on here, and it's not restoring law is one thing, and maybe that's secondary in this, but does it also, I feel like, is there something going on that may or may not is about to happen that they feel like they need to do this?
I'm not sure about that, but it definitely is a bad precedent to set unless you think, and this would be, hubris compounded, if you think, J.D. Vance is guaranteed to win and Republicans will always win. Let's say there's a financial market crash, which could easily happen based on all of the, historical indices and ratios. And let's just say the Democrats win the midterms for whatever, because of economic reasons and maybe other, war-related reasons. Then let's say Newsom's the next president. We've now set the precedent of having National Guard troops in Humvees patrolling our cities. That's a bad precedent. I remember when, all the way back in like I think maybe started in the 70s, but for sure by the 80s, it started with the feds, and then it spread to just every level of law enforcement doing this thing called asset forfeiture. And at the time, the way that asset forfeiture was sold was, it's just a way to go after these big drug kingpins. They've got this dirty money and they're buying a mansion in Miami, like the old Miami Vice days.
Scarface, so like Scarface?
Yeah, we're going to seize Scarface's mansion and his yachts. And everybody's like, yeah, those drug kingpins, take their assets. But once you set that precedent, everybody uses it. So you're driving with cash and they pull you over and they just seize your cash because you can't prove where you got it. You're going to an auction where you're going to buy a tractor and you've got to have cash, and they just seize it at a traffic stop. They don't arrest you. They just say, oh, you can't prove where you got this. Maybe it's drug money. We're going to have to test it. So they take your assets. Well, putting troops on the streets in cities, I get that it's legal in terms of the Constitution, in terms of like calling out the militia and Insurrection Act and things like that, if there was really an insurrection. But I would save that for, something orders of magnitude worse than just chronic crime in Chicago. In fact, if there's chronic crime in Chicago, let the Democrats own it. Let the Democrats own it. You go in there to fix Chicago's crime problem with the National Guard, and if the gangs start sniping at National Guard troops because they don't want them disrupting their various drug and other trafficking, what are you going to do? Increase the number of troops? Are you going to put people in all the projects guarding, each balcony, each guarding each high point? I mean, are you going to have the shot detectors everywhere with an operations center 24 hours a day? Let the Democrats own crime in Chicago. It's like a demonstration to the country that the Democrats can't run a city. If you go in there to try to fix it and you make it worse, now you own it. That's the Colin Powell, if you broke it, you bought it. And what does victory look like? And what's your exit strategy? I mean, nobody can explain when are they going to declare Washington, D.C. a victory and pull out the guard? Is it like a permanent thing now? But that's at least just one federal district. But Chicago is, Chicago, Baltimore, St. Louis, go down the list. Forget it.
Have you been following Katie Davis court? Like, what a disaster Portland is. She's one of the on-the-ground journalists, reporting up in Portland. I mean, that city's just such a clusterfuck. But I agree with you, and the way you said it, I think was spot on, much better than I could have articulated. But also, are you surprised that like the people on the right, like the MAGA influencers or the MAGA media, they're cheering for this? And somebody pointed this out, and I was only 23 during 9/11, and a different headspace at that time. But, and you tell me if I'm wrong here, but after 9/11, people were, yeah, we need Homeland Security. Yeah, we need TSA. Yeah, we need Patriot Act.
Well, it's always easier that's when you can ramp up the edging your way towards totalitarian control, just more and more federal control, government control. But after each incident, and the ratchet effect means it's very difficult to take these controls off once they're on. So, and I just don't want Americans to be used to seeing armed soldiers in military uniforms, military vehicles on our streets. That's Banana Republic stuff. That's Argentina. And I don't want Americans getting used to that. Not that look, if it was up to me, in morally speaking, I'd have like death squads, vigilantes authorized to shoot all these drug dealers, right? I mean, fine. It's not a moral issue in that sense. I just don't want the next Democrat to come in and have the military, let's say, doing gun confiscation, using, there's not supposed to be a gun registration list. That's why theoretically, the gun stores don't have the records shared with the federal government. But I mean, come on, using data mining and AI, it's so easy to determine who's got all the AR-15s and the ammunition. You buy the stuff with your credit card. I mean, you just bought the El Grande gun safe, and in the last 5 years, you've bought 50,000 rounds of ammunition, and scopes and silencers. They don't need a national gun registration list. They know. So I could see Governor Newsom's anti-gun strike force, rolling up to people's houses with the National Guard. I just don't like the precedent of having the National Guard involved in any kind of, because they'll there'll be a law that bans assault weapons at some point, and then they'll say, just like this first book, Enemies Foreign and Domestic, my first novel, they'll say you have 1 week to turn in these banned guns, and if you don't, we're going to reward snitches who know you have them, and we're going to do raids and put people in prison.
And we saw that work during COVID.
Yeah, people will absolutely snitch on their neighbors, ex-girlfriends, ex-wives that know you've got this stuff. And they're going to know you've got this stuff anyway because people buy everything on credit card. If you've bought a suppressor that's made to go on a 5.56 threaded barrel, they know what you've got. So they don't need the record from the gun store when they see you've bought all these magazines and scopes and ammunition, tactical vests, hard plates. They're going to know just what they're dealing with. So yeah, I'm very leery of and I think that Trump is he's like walking into an ambush on this. And I wish that people like Hegseth that have experience in the recent GWAT, Global War on Terrorism, I wish that he would be saying, look, you do not want to volunteer to be the police chief of Mosul. Stay the hell out of there. We do not need to be the peacekeepers of Ramadi. And my earliest experience with this was actually Beirut in '83, which is you go in as the peacekeeping force. We're going to be referees. We're just here for good purposes. Of course, we have to defend ourselves, so we have some guns, but we're just going to drive around Beirut, keeping the Christians and the Shia and the Sunnis and the Druze and the Israeli militias from all killing each other. We're just gonna like kind of maintain the order. And within months, you've got the New Jersey shelling the Bekaa Valley with 16-inch shells because you get sucked into a taking sides always. Somebody starts sniping at you and you start sniping back, then it's mortars, then it's artillery, then it's the New Jersey, then it's the embassy blown up, and then where the Marines are sleeping blown up. Wasn't a barracks. They always say that it's a barracks. Anyway, this is a process that is like really easy to understand. And going into Chicago saying, we're just going to be peacekeepers. We're just going to stay on the playground so the drug dealers can't come out. Well, the drug dealers aren't going to be happy about losing their income. So they've got a lot of, wind up idiots that can just, already we've seen just in peacetime, in no National Guard time, just as sort of like gang initiation, people walking up to police cars and shooting a cop like through the window. Just as a gang initiation, just to see how crazy you are, what you'll do. So imagine if the drug dealers are all being put out of business because at every highway exit going in and out of Chicago, there's National Guard waving people over and looking in trunks. I mean, I'm not sure how they're going to do all this, but if it really impinges on the drug cartel business, then they're going to have people start taking pot shots at National Guard. And then it escalates from there.
And then what, are you bringing tanks? And then you have Apache helicopters flying through?
Drones? You're going to have Delta doing snatches on drug cartel guys. So yeah, and this is related, doesn't seem like it would be, but it's directly related to threats to send our operators right into Mexico, to take out drug cartel guys in Mexico. Well, these are transnational organizations. The drug cartel guys, you picture the film the Sicario, right? And Benito Torres is at the end, shoots the family at dinner.
Such a good movie.
Great movie. Emily Blunt can do anything.
Second one wasn't bad either.
Not bad, but the first one's awesome. But Emily Blunt, she's a fantastic actress, can do anything. Mary Poppins, Sicario, you name it, right? So these guys aren't just going to be sitting around in Mexico waiting for Delta to paraglide in and snatch them and not do something on the other side of the border. They'll be kidnapping the families of politicians. So I'm not for like a hands-off policy on drug cartels. It's not like, oh, Matt's suggesting just let the drug cartels run rampant. But I'm saying there's going to be action and reaction, and you've got to know where it's going to lead. Don't just think that this isn't a dynamic and interconnected problem where, oh, we're just going to put troops in Chicago, crime will go down, and everybody will think Trump is great. That's not necessarily true. And the same drug cartels that are in Mexico are also in Chicago. I mean, we've seen it from Venezuela, the Trinidad Aragua group. They operate all over. These are transnational groups. I mean, you've got all kind of international mafias operating in the country. And when you go after their business model, they're going to attack you somewhere else. But I think that the Democrats should own their crime problems and point them out and humiliate them, make fun of them, right? Show people that Democrats can't run a complicated city. That's great. But if you put the troops in, the National Guard troops, and it goes bad, now you own it. You've just transferred that guilt from Democrat politicians to the Trump administration. And why do that? Just do Washington as a demonstration project, but do not put troops in other cities. Big mistake.
What about the executive order of the burning the American flag?
It's interesting that from the 1970s and 80s, even going back to the 60s, when we had an incredibly super liberal Supreme Court, before that, they could just say pornography's banned. This is free. You can have all the free speech you want, but you want to make porno movies, you're going to jail. Okay. And
they did that in the 60s, Matt?
Oh, sure.
Oh, I didn't. Okay.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It had to be like hidden. It was like a black market, like selling drugs. It was like selling drugs to have grainy black and white 8mm films like that. So the whole idea that you can do whatever you want as long as it can be in some way put under the rubric of speech. Okay. Other Supreme Court said speech. That's talking about politics. Do you want capitalism or communism? But the idea that you can seduce little farm girls getting off the bus from Wisconsin and New York City and get them hooked on drugs and then lure them into a life or coerce them into a life of being in porno films and then profit from it, by mass producing VHS videotapes. Remember the technology, a lot of this piggybacks on top of technology. It wasn't practical to reproduce 8mm film reels. Okay. All this didn't happen until the VHS, tape recorders came out and were mass produced. So so these two things happened. The Supreme Court said everything is speech. If you want to take a shit on the Virgin Mary statue, pardon me for being so crass, that's speech. But we've seen how this is used in a completely arbitrary way, because this lady, Shiloh Phoenix, what's her name? The
Hendricks, Shiloh Hendricks?
Shiloh Hendricks, yeah. She's probably going to go to jail for a few months for using the N-word. And, that's incitement. Using the N-word, it was, they're saying it's not speech, it was incitement. Well, there's a concept in the law, and I'm no lawyer, believe me, but I believe there's a concept in the law called fighting words. If you go into the bar or at a ball game and you say, to some other dude, your wife there is a whore, and I slept with her last night, and she loves it. And then you punch him. Ordinarily, the guy that throws the first punch is going to be the one accused of assault, right? Charged with assault. But there's this fighting words concept. You call somebody's wife a hoe, right? And laugh and mock her, and then you get punched. That's going to be considered incitement. Or anyway, the Shiloh Hendricks situation, she uses the N-word, she's going to go to jail. If you put Palestinian flags up at Harvard, they're going to kick you off the campus, or they're going to revoke your green card. Look, I'm not for these guys, the Palestinian flag guys, but why can you tear down one flag, not another flag, etc. So what they're trying to do is make this flag burning law a aggravating an aggravating factor like incitement, like fighting words, and essentially you would be telling a jury, if somebody burns a flag and then somebody else walks up and punches you in the face, that's going to be considered like fighting words, like calling somebody's wife a whore. You see what I'm saying? You got punched for burning a flag because we consider burning a flag to be such antisocial behavior that it's calculated to raise such anger. So it's shaky ground. And it also, like putting National Guard in Chicago, you're kind of handing a tool to the other side, because they'll start printing little flags 6 inches. Oh, if I burn this, do I go to jail? What about a postage stamp? What if I buy stamps at the post office with a flag on it? Can I burn that? So you can do, what was it, reductio ad absurdum with that. What's a flag? But, I just want to point out that before the 60s and 70s, there were a lot of things that were banned, and nobody thought we didn't have free speech, like making porno movies. No, right? If you had burned a flag in the 50s and you'd gotten the crap beat out of you, the police would have just said, well, hey, you incited it. You brought it on yourself. Same as if you called my wife a hoe. You have free speech, but you can't use fighting words. You have free speech, but you can't shout fire in a crowded theater. Unless there's a fire, right? And they're going to try to say burning the flag creates that much anger that if violence is inflicted on you, we're not going to charge the people that beat the crap out of you. So these are complicated questions, but remember, until the Supreme Court decisions in the 60s, I mean, we had prayer in school. Nobody thought it was, the First Amendment is not against a state religion. Massachusetts couldn't say everybody's got to belong to this sect, but nowhere does it say in the Constitution that there's a separation of church and state. That doesn't exist. That's like taken from a letter Thomas Jefferson wrote to somebody else, a hypothetical. Nowhere does it say you can't have prayer in school. So the Supreme Court, set a lot of precedents that we've considered like, bedrock principles that really weren't, like Roe v. Wade, where that wasn't a bedrock principle. But if liberals want to do unlimited abortion, then they would just point to Roe versus Wade and say, you can't dispute it. It's settled law. It's the law. Well, I mean, it used to be the law that you could drag runaway slaves back from, free states. That used to be the law. But if we have a more conservative Supreme Court, if the pendulum switches in this country, we could see things banned that we think are protected free speech, like, for example, porno. If the population turns really against it, because it's like considered to be leading to all of these social maladies we're suffering, I could see it being banned again. We'll see.
I feel like that's in the same category with the troops. Like it's a slippery slope. Now you're deeming, and again, I'm not for it. I mean, people that burn American flags, I mean, I think they're pieces of shit in my opinion, but it's another slippery slope to where, all right, federal government coming in.
For a long time, the Communist Party was like a banned organization. And if you had ever been a member of the Communist Party, you couldn't join the military. John Brennan admits he was a communist, and he became the head of the CIA. So these things can shift radically. I mean, if in the 40s and 50s you ever said, oh, a guy that was an American Communist Party guy, he's going to join the CIA and rise to the top. They would have put you in a mental asylum. That's completely impossible. Just like if you had said in the 50s, oh, porno film's going to be completely everywhere, and you're everywhere. And as long as everybody's over 18 in the movie, we don't care what you do, right? People would have said, you're out of your mind. That'll never happen. You know, in the in Maryland and other states, in Maryland in the first half of the 20th century, some of the counties down in southern Maryland, there wasn't a Bay Bridge yet. So people didn't drive to the ocean beaches, to like Ocean City, Maryland. They went to beaches on the Chesapeake Bay that were in a close drive from Washington and Baltimore. And these places were known as being like very shady because they had shady sheriffs and shady politicians, and they had gambling, and they had houses of ill repute. Not literally. I mean, there was no like sign saying, this is a brothel, but it was sort of like the dime a dance thing, but you pay a little more and maybe you get more than a dance. And these were people did campaigns against them, the gambling and the vice, and put these things out of business. So gambling became an underground thing, like the numbers racket. Okay, lottery was an illegal street mafia thing after that because it was considered a vice. We're not going to tolerate it legally. No more slot machines in Maryland. They're banned. But then the pendulum swings and the state's promoting lottery. It's like now, since we're in charge of the numbers racket, we're going to have it advertised on the TV and on billboards. Powerball's up to 750 million. All you suckers buy the numbers, okay? All you suckers. So the government went from tolerating gambling in, say, the 20s and 30s, banning it 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and then tolerating it again. I mean, it was the exception that Las Vegas had gambling. After the dam was built out there, the Hoover Dam, the vice of gambling was associated with the prostitution and the bars in a tent city for the workers building the Hoover Dam. That's Las Vegas. So it was like, okay, well, look, Nevada, it's really a poor desert state. They got nothing else going for them. You got to go. It's not easy to get there. We've only got like propeller airplanes or you could drive a car there, but it won't affect the rest of the country if we allow this vice of gambling in Nevada, but don't have it anywhere else. We're just going to allow that to be like our little red light district of vice. It'll be called Las Vegas. Then in the 70s, Atlantic City was like, well, we're poor and depressed. We'll have it here. Within 2 decades, it's like every damn Indian tribe has got a casino everywhere. You drive across Arizona, you're going from casino to casino. Same thing in the South, riverboats and gambling's everywhere. So the moral pendulum swings back and forth. So I could see flag burning being banned, and if you burn a flag and 20 yahoos or 20 great conservatives, whatever you want to call them, jump on you and beat the crap out of you, then the local judge might just say, hey, what did you expect? You burned a flag. They beat the crap out of you. Just the same as if you called somebody's wife a whore in front of his kids. That's free speech? No, it's incitement.
Yeah, it's the moral compass in this country. I mean, it's and just our society, the decay that we are continuing to see, and even oh, go ahead.
Yeah, another. This relates to the Minnesota shooting yesterday.
I was just going there. So that's fine.
Yeah, the guy who came up with the idea of the lobotomy, I believe he won a Nobel Prize for medicine. They thought that like sticking this wire in through like the eyeball and up into the frontal cortex and cutting some things was like going to be a salvation for people that were mentally ill. Rose Kennedy She wasn't, she wasn't on the Harvard track, but she wasn't a bad person, but she kind of embarrassed the Kennedy family, so they had her lobotomized. Poor little Rose, okay? Rose Kennedy, lobotomized. The guy that invented the lobotomy got the Nobel Prize, I'm pretty sure. And it was considered a miracle procedure. And then it was abused, and then people understood you're basically just diminishing the brain capacity. And, you know, anyway, the idea of doing these procedures, whether it's the surgical mutilation or just the chemical castration on minor children. I mean, you can't give a kid a freaking Tylenol at school. But if in many states, if a kid is just confused, a woke progressive teacher can lead that kid towards the suggestion that maybe you're in the wrong body. So kids that wouldn't have even thought of this are coming out as trans, and then there's a whole pipeline. It's like the cilia in your lungs. It's like all of these little fronds waving things along, pushing things like peristalsis, getting the food down your to your stomach and out. So once somebody suggests maybe you're in the wrong body, you suggest that to a 10 or 11, 12, 13-year-old, that's an evil thing to do. It's confusing enough being an adolescent. And then having an entire industry built around this where you're going to be a patient for life, basically. You giving massive male hormones to females in adolescence. It's a total wild, horrible, evil experiment with terrible outcomes, or the reverse, giving estrogen to men, giving testosterone to women, girls, adolescents too, during that developmental phase. Extremely evil. This is Dr. Mengele stuff. This is lobotomy stuff. And Pritzker, the governor of Illinois, the Pritzkers inherited, it's interesting, I just saw Wikipedia, they want Wikipedia to eliminate the early life category because it's so often used in a anti-Semitic way. Okay, if you can understand what I'm saying. So the Pritzkers, this generation of Pritzkers inherited billions of dollars. So you just, hand a family billions of dollars, and one of them pays so much money, more than like a presidential campaign. He's the governor of Illinois. Another one is a trans billionaire who's been funding all of these horrible Dr. Mengele clinics and paying the sinecures, in academia, when you grants and funding these clinics and hospitals to do trans experimental surgeries on children. That's J.D. Pritzker's sister/brother. I forget her name, but it's like the first trans billionaire. And it's just extremely evil. And I think that, there's going to be a revulsion coming out of this. If Dylan Roof walks into Charleston and shoots black people, it's like immediately we know the motive. He's a white racist. He's got family with Confederate flags on their trailer. But when it's a trans shooter and they're like off the charts overrepresented as a percentage of the population and as a percentage of these mass shooters, it's like astronomical. And the mainstream media still won't connect it to the trans ideology, to confusing people who are already mentally ill and telling them that you're a special, wonderful person, but the conservatives want to genocide you. I mean, this is all over Reddit today, that they're celebrating these trans murderers. They hold them up as like Luigi Mangione heroes. And, this is going to lead to a backlash. Sometimes you'll see, what comes after Weimar Germany is the guy with a little mustache, because people are going to get sick of it. Just having our kids awash in drugs, porn, foreign immigrants that have like a rape culture mindset. And average Americans at some point are going to say, we need to get out the big broom. We got to clean out the stables.
I thought it would have happened by now. I mean, the way I don't know. I don't know if that day will ever come at this point. I mean, at least not yet. But
It only comes when the refrigerator's empty.
right, and we're not near that. We're
We're
nowhere
not
close to
near
that.
that. No, there's a lot of inertia. That the train might be heading towards the broken section of rails with the bridge out, but the mass of this thing just keeps moving. You have a very powerful economy, millions of people, going to work every day, and but yeah, eventually I think that we get to the point where there's a financial collapse where none of the tricks work, and they can load digits onto EBT cards, but the food isn't in the store. That'll be the end game. And when when supermarkets are looted and can't be restocked, then the people in the suburbs that still have a store that's not been looted are going to say, "You get near our store and we'll shoot you," no matter what the police do. At a certain point, the police have to align with what the community wants. In the early American settlement era, there were justices of the peace. That concept of like Judge Roy Bean, the law west of the Pecos kind of thing. But that's sort of an outlandish example. But it was very common during the settlement of the West to kind of you appointed a marshal, and you gave this guy the right to like arrest people, try people, hang people, because you had to maintain law and order one way or the other. And if there wasn't an official government way, you'd just make up your own way. And if cities are on fire and the suburbs are under threat, people will protect their neighborhoods. And then at that point, if there are just so few police left, are they going to try to disarm the vigilante communities, or are they going to join the vigilantes? It's always a balancing act. During Katrina, that was a temporary disaster, and you saw like neighborhoods blocking bridges and things like that. But then when order is restored, people are arrested for that. And but what if order's not restored? What if people get the feeling that this is going to be a crisis that's going to go on and on for months or years? Then you're going to see people just putting up signs saying looters shot, and it's not a joke. It's thieves will be shot. I mean, in the West, you didn't hear about rape gangs, right? I mean, you didn't hear. There was a morality even among criminals. I might steal your horse, but I'm not going to rape your daughter on the way in and out of your ranch. But if you got caught for stealing the horse, they hanged you. I mean, it was don't steal a horse because we'll hang you. And it's, not an idle threat. It'll be done the same week. And that kind of justice can return if we're seeing it. We're kind of starting to see it in the UK. That girl with the girl, she only flashed it for a second.
How the hell was she carrying that with? Here's the thing I don't understand about this. Maybe was she 16 or 14? That girl.
12 and 14. Two sisters, 12 and 14.
Okay, so the one with the axe was the older one, I think, right?
I'm not even sure if she was the 12-year-old or not, but they'd been hassled by these migrants, and these guys consider 12 years old. They absolutely believe post-puberty, you're fair game for sex, period. That's like not even a dispute for these Southern Asian, Pakistanis, et cetera, in the UK and Europe. They absolutely feel absolutely zero moral outrage about taking liberties with an infidel girl. An infidel girl is what they call walking around no hijab, not a faithful Muslim. She's just fair game. Mothers tell their sons and daughters, they use the cat and meat analogy. If you set a dish of uncovered meat in the alley behind your house and a cat came along and ate the meat, would you be angry at the cat? No, because the cat is just living its nature, and the meat was uncovered. That's what that's what devout Muslim mothers tell their daughters and sons. And they tell their daughter that's why you have to be covered and wear the hijab to indicate you're off base for rape. But the little infidel girl with her hair uncovered and she's over puberty, she's 100% available, just like meat left on a dish uncovered to a cat. So this is such a culture clash. And these migrant men, they're also in the habit of going to playgrounds and filming girls, like doing the, cute little girl on the swing. And it's like, not innocent. They're videoing these things. And then they're hassling the girls and, do you want to go on a date kind of stuff? And you're talking to a 12-year-old. So yeah, one of the girls went home and got, a knife and a hatchet, probably from like the tool shed or something, and came back to where these guys are. I mean, imagine if you live in a housing complex and the area of the stairs and the dumpster and a little tiny playground and your little parking lot, it's the only place you have to play, or you have to go through these areas to get to a park. And sitting around on picnic table benches here, there, and everywhere are groups of 8 or 10 quote unquote migrant men. And every time you walk by, they're like leering at you and making the kissing sound, right? And talking about what they'd like to do to you in their language and in English. And people are getting raped and abducted. I mean, that's why they're painting the St. George Cross, in England on crosswalks and traffic roundabouts and putting the flag up. The English are finally starting to say we've had enough. What's that Kipling poem, The Wrath of the Awakened Saxon? At some point it's going to be an explosion because the migrants aren't just going to go home. They're not just going to voluntarily leave. They control like the 5 biggest cities in England: Manchester, Birmingham, London. All the city centers are Muslim majority now. They're virtually becoming Sharia zones.
Didn't that girl get arrested too for that?
That's what I heard, but I mean, it's pretty hard to. It's difficult politically because it's so obvious. I mean, they call Starmer, what's his name? Keir Starmer, two-tier Keir. That you can aggravated assault girls for weeks and you'll get like 6 years in jail and you're out in 3. But if you put an anti-migrant meme on social media, you'll get a bigger sentence. So the people are sick of it. They're sick of it. The trader elite in Europe invited this invasion. These globalists cannot control a cohesive, homogenous, strong national group. But if you bring in all these factions that are constantly at each other's throats, then you have to have, strong police controls over everybody. I mean, in France, they have what do you call it? You can't go out at night.
Curfew?
A curfew for like under 20. Can't be out after dark in France. Well, this wasn't because of French kids. I mean, so French kids can't go to the movies and like come riding your bicycle home after dark? When did the French kids all go crazy? No, it's because of the migrants they allowed in. So because of the migrants, now there's a curfew on everybody in France, I think like under 21 or under 20. So this is just a classic example of the elites using this importation of foreign cultures to institute more control. It's what Sam Francis called the anarcho-tyranny. You have to have the anarchy. You invite the anarchy, then you need the strong police force to control everybody, put everybody on lockdown. Well, we're seeing maybe a little bit of a rising in England, but if you look at the demographics, England is kind of screwed because the Muslims have 4 kids per woman, and the English have one. So you need two, right? 2.2 to make up for accidents and people that don't get married. So if you have less than 2.2 children per woman average, you're fading away. And if you invite in a group that has 4 children per woman, you can do the math, and in 30 years you're outnumbered. So you can say, well, in England only 10% are Muslim. Yeah, but they're the ones that are under 20 years old. The everybody over 40 or past childbearing years almost doesn't count. If all you look at is people under 30, and it's right now, say it's 25% foreign, it's easy to just do the math and work out that you're in a doom spiral. Whites are going extinct and they'll be replaced by Muslims. That's why all these most of the British politicians are kowtowing to the Muslims, because they want to be on the side they think is going to be inheriting Britain. And this was done by traitors. They invited this invasion. Traitors.
And yet nobody wants to cross that barrier. So that girl is 14 and she's Scotland, and she was arrested. I looked it up while I was talking to you.
Yeah, it's another, we talked about movies before. There's a great movie that had problems in production, but it's a classic called Major Dundee with Charlton Heston and Richard Harris, who hated each other. So they were both like big time stars. Anyway.
They personally hated each other?
Yeah, the whole movie, their animosity was totally real. But the movie had production problems, so there's flaws in how the movie comes out. But Major Dundee, I always thought that's so cool because this girl is from Dundee, Scotland. So whenever I'm thinking of Joan of Dundee, all these memes, AI pictures, etc., of her holding the sword and an axe, like she's the Viking princess now, poor little scared 14-year-old. She just held him up for a second, and that's the somebody just screen captured that shot. But yeah, Joan of Dundee, and you think of what these are like, the toughest bastards in the world, the Scots. And it's like the joke that the Vikings got to Scotland, right? And they are like, don't go back to Scotland. There's crazy people there. You just go around Scotland. The Vikings are like, no, Scotland off the list. These guys love to fight too much. They're drinking and fighting just for fun. Don't even go to Scotland. And now Scotland's like the most woke place in the UK. And it's not the 14-year-old girls that invited this disaster.
She stood up more than the men. I mean, that video, I've watched that video probably 10 times.
And
that was a serious axe, Matt. I'm like, what the hell is she? I've never seen a little.
It was a hatchet. It's a hatchet. It was like a medium. It's only 20 inches long.
It looked serious to me. What was the knife she had?
It was like a large bayonet or chopping kind of implement also. But I mean, look, good for her. I mean, and if it shames men, that's great. They need to be shamed because, there are consequences to everything. I mean, the English in 2 world wars lost. They say the flower of English manhood was lost on, like at Verdun. The 4 Fs, the flat-footed, dumb guys that weren't fit for military service. They survived both world wars. Their best fighter pilots, their best soldiers that were the ones that it has a huge consequence when you look what's happening to Ukraine. I mean, but you have a huge consequence when you take that, say, oh, well, there's only a couple million were killed. Yeah, but that was those were your most high testosterone, aggressive men, and they're gone from the gene pool. And then with social conditioning, They have the same kind of situation in the UK with the dole. If there's not a dad in the house, mom gets more welfare benefits. So you break up the family that way. And we're being fed all these microplastics and soy products full of estrogen. So the average male in Europe and America today, like the average 20-year-old male, has the testosterone of like an 80-year-old from 50 years ago. So we're raising soy jacks that aren't going to fight. And because of the estrogenization of our societies, I mean, beginning with, I guess, well, I wouldn't say it began there, but a big bellwether was the 19th Amendment, women getting the vote. And women are emotional creatures. They see a couple orphans and they got to adopt them, right? A man is like, no, you can't just bring home every stray cat. I'm sorry. We got to take care of our family. You can't adopt the world's problems. So open borders and welfare for all, these are situations that would have never come up before women had the vote. Just never. Men would just be like, no, we can't do it. Our family first, our town first, that's it. Those people over in those countries, they got to solve their problems. So you have the woke faculty lounge mentality running a lot of our cities. I mean, why do you see in all these Democrat cities, you see so many of these like woke female police chiefs? I mean, they weren't patrol officers. They weren't kicking down doors and doing, drug busts. They were, promoted through DEI. And the men that flourish under the female faculty lounge paradigm organization, they're the soy jacks. So the soy jacks only can get ahead by being approved by the estrogen maiden, old maids. They have to appeal to that faculty lounge. I'm just as woke as you. I may be a guy, but I apologize for the patriarchy. So let me have a little sliver of the power at the university or on the city council. And look at in Europe. I mean, half of the heads of the defense departments of Europe are women. I mean, when were they ever in, combat in any war? Never. And they're determining defense policy for Europe. I mean, we're in a really bad way. And I reading Ian Burlingame a lot lately, the guy is like, he's really in a super writing mode, and when somebody's just like fountaining good writing, it's like, wow, stand back. The guy is on, but he's very dialed in with what I'm talking about, the estrogenization of our society. And this isn't going to be turned around until there's some kind of a collapse. And then the men just say, look, we have to deal with it the old fashioned way. And honey, we appreciate you, but you can't be on the war council anymore. When you were in charge of the war council, you invited the Huns into our territory. It's bad enough we had to fight the enemy in the next valley, but you invited in our enemies, and then we had to deal with them before we could even deal with the other enemies. So you're out of the loop now, honey. I'm sorry, but that, reality is going to come back and assert itself, and these, women-driven societies are going to fail. And because they destroy their own defense mechanisms through suicidal empathy. We're just going to adopt all the problems of the world, and the people that are working have to pay for it. I mean, it's making them sick in England that fighting age men are being put up in prime hotels, 3 meals a day, all paid for by the English taxpayer. And England's economy is going into the crapper. There's forces inside of the UK that are leading to an explosion, I think, very soon.
Well, that's what, it's how to me all these dots are connecting when you talk about, like, I had Martin Armstrong on the other day, and he was saying, talking about the European economy, And, so is that why this escalation potentially with Russia? What do you need if the economy is about to collapse? You need war.
Traditionally, and you have the chance to destroy all of the books, so there's no future forensic analysis of who did what to get to that economic point. The war happened, and then it's a great reset. But the fact that so many of the European leaders are women and soy jack men. When you have a female head of your defense department, you have and you see this a lot in the military. You can get females that are trying to be out macho the guys. They're trying to prove that they're just as butch as anybody. And talking smack about going to war with Russia, like Germany is, like some in Britain are, it's like, a guy raised on, from the playground on, dealing with fist fights, dealing with, brawls here and there, knowing when to back off and when to push ahead, when you're just going to, the other gang showed up and they outnumber you 5-1, you better just like chill out and find a way to de-escalate because there's no way you can win. Men in a past era of schoolyard aggression, fighting after football practice and going to parks where the new ethnic group is arriving and you're pushing back on them. Men have a sense of like, there's times to talk smack and times not to talk smack. Women don't have that, by and large. So this is a hypothetical for them. And they think we're just going to threaten Russia. Germany has got no energy. They have no industry. Half of their young men are foreign born that aren't going to fight Russia for anybody. So having women in charge of these decisions is just suicidal. I mean, it's mad. I mean, in fact, I think that Putin and Russia has been showing a lot of forbearance. Estonia has been launching drones, not little FPV drones, but like big monoplane drones that carry like, 100 kilo payloads. These are like small airplanes. It's been thought they had to have been launched from the Baltic states just by where they were hitting inside of Russia. And there was one that just like went off course and crashed in Estonia. It's like, whoops, kind of like proving the point that this little NATO country, this little, Grand Duchy of Estonia, this little micro country is allowing itself to be used. I mean, there are Germans in Estonia, and these drones that are like small airplanes are taken off from Estonia to hit targets inside of Russia. I mean, Russia could wipe these things out with Kinjal missiles and other missiles, and they're just like, we can tolerate it because these are just like 100 or 100 kilogram warheads, couple 100-kilometer range, but they're being launched from a NATO country into Russia. I mean, these are not rational decisions because if it comes to a real war, Europe can't fight Russia. It has no industry. It has no energy.
And Russia doesn't want Europe, Matt. I mean,
basing
on my conversation, what do they
with
need?
Armstrong?
What's there? Right. What's there that they? I mean,
they're inheriting their welfare bill.
And the illegals.
You want to take over paying welfare for their illegals? You want to inherit their social disintegration? I mean, if Russia puts a fence up now, it's to keep them out. I mean, the last thing they want is to inherit the basket case of Western Europe. But yeah, having female, when you see female police chiefs and female generals, okay, as men who grew up from like grade school on, getting into fights now and then, and being in aggressive contact sports and martial arts, you can just tell these are countries that are being run by people that have never been punched in the face in their life. It's all hypothetical, and they're posturing like they're tough, like they're real super tough, but they're not. But they don't know that they're not. So it's a very dangerous position to be in. It's like just as a kind of a social example, male and female, I see people with face piercings, like their eyebrow, their lip, their nose. I just immediately know you've never been in a fist fight. You just have never. Because sometimes a fist fight begins with a sucker punch that hits you, okay? I can tell you from experience. Sometimes the fight is unexpected, and their first hint is when you get hit in the face with a fist. And if you've got a piercing on your face, that is where that fist is going to hit. And you're going to be cut like a huge gash right there immediately. So anybody I see with piercings on their face, it's like, oh, you have never been in a fight. And that would have been like complete common sense in the generation that grew up where schoolyard brawling and fighting was common. I mean, it was common. This was just part of the era of growing up in America. You'd get in a little bit of pushing, and the next thing you know, there's a circle of, 50 of your schoolmates, and you're in the middle, and it's like, put up your dukes. Somebody's gonna be bleeding before class.
What do you think of Netanyahu doing the media circuit as of late? He was on Patrick Bet-David. Was he on the Nelk Boys, I think?
Yeah, and there are Christian Zionist pastors that are agreeing with him. They've just got to wipe out the Gazans. And no, I think that October 7th was a green flag operation. It's a fact that anybody can now look up. Israel created Hamas as a political vehicle to counter the Palestinian Authority, so there would not be one unified political voice speaking for all Palestinians, which would be much harder for Israel to deal with than having a divided Palestinian, political setup with the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank and Hamas in Gaza. So the Israelis created Hamas. Anybody that thinks that October 7th happened because, all the cameras weren't working, all the guards fell asleep, it just, all these paragliders that they just happened to have that all were working at the same time, and they had no idea this was happening.
And they put the event, they put it together the day before and just carried it out. There was no training, there was no preparation. And I looked this up yesterday, not to cut you off, but the Gaza stretch is like 25 by 5 or 7 miles.
Sure, it's tiny. And
the Mediterranean Sea is behind it. So you're talking a tiny little piece of land.
Completely controlled by Israeli patrol boats. So if you're going to have the final solution of the Gaza problem, it's called Gideon's Chariot, the Operation Gideon's Chariot. If you're going to do the final solution to the Gaza problem, which is we're going to turn it into rubble and there'll be nobody there. They're either going to be dead, starved, or they're going to leave and go to somewhere else. And this is going to be a problem for a long time because a forced famine, a starvation siege. The Irish had a famine in the 1840s as a result of potato blight, but England controlled 90% of the territory of Ireland at the time, and the big estates, the big farms of Ireland were sending cattle and grain back to England all through the famine. So the tenant farmers were living and dying based on the little potato plots that they had. So when the potato blight happened, they had no food. Meanwhile, they're watching, cattle train wagon loads of grain heading out to all the ports, all through the famine. Well, this led to a bitterness, a very deep bitterness against the English. Multi-generational, centuries later, anger and bitterness against the English. So this starvation siege in Gaza, which is what it is, I mean, the feeding centers that are set up, if all you have is flour, if you see truckloads of bags of flour going in, and all you can do is put ditch water together with flour to mix it up and maybe try to even cook it or just eat it raw, you can fill your belly with flour and still starve to death. There's no nutrition value. I mean, imagine if you just said, okay, we're going to keep you in your house, but here's a 100-pound bag of flour, and you got water from your sink, and that's it. You're going to still die of malnutrition. So this is a situation in Gaza. It's a starvation siege, and the goal is to make Gaza Arab free, and then the Israelis will come in and bulldoze it, and they'll have is Greater Israel another part of it. And today they're also bombing in Lebanon again. The Israelis seem to have no problem with the ISIS guy Jolani. He now goes by a new name, but I'm just going to always call him Jolani, the CIA, ISIS, Al Qaeda guy. He has no problem with Israel. They've got a working relationship. This is all part of this Greater Israel dream.
Do you think they'll be? I was going to say, do you think they'll be successful in moving the? First of all, I'm amazed that any Palestinians are still alive. But
I know.
Do you think they'll be successful clearing out Gaza?
I think that Israel is increasing the anger towards the country greatly, massively, and I don't think that the Iran war is necessarily finished either. Something can trigger that again. The immediate ceasefire after the 12-day war, and you got to give credit for Trump. He's good at naming things because that the 12-day war seems to have stuck. That war was called off in a hurry because we were running out of missile defense systems. The THAADs, which cost like millions of dollars each, you got to fire several of them at every ballistic missile coming in from Iran. And many of the ballistic missiles are just inert dummies, just to, they'll fire a salvo, 6 or 7 ballistic missiles, and you've got to assign a couple of THAADs to each one, and still leakers get through. So Israel was getting pounded, and Iran was just getting warmed up. So that theater can open up again. Israel's very vulnerable in that respect. It's sort of like what's going on in Ukraine. Trump is eager to get the Alaska going, even when there's no chance of a ceasefire or an armistice, zero chance, because Ukraine's defenses are breaking down. The Ukraine is not able to hold Russia back anymore, and pretty soon Russia's just going to go for the Dnieper River, and nobody will be able to stop them. So the calls for the ceasefire in after the 12-day war and the recent call for ceasefire and peace deal in Anchorage, Alaska, it's because we're losing. It's like, stop, time out. We don't have any defense capability. We're tapped out. We can't make weapons fast enough, as fast as the Russians and the Iranians, backed up by China. So yeah, Israel's in a very tenuous position. I think Bibi Netanyahu is a very diabolical, evil man at this point. That to greenlight Gaza so that he could leverage that atrocity into 100 times greater atrocity. To get America into World War I, when America was isolationist and America had a huge German community, for example, did not want to go into World War I. You have to do a Lusitania. You have to whip up the war hysteria through an atrocity. So you stick a passenger liner straight into the path of a U-boat, like a guaranteed kill, like right underneath of Ireland, known U-boat hangout. They did that intentionally, like a pawn sacrifice in chess. And I think that's what they did in Gaza, so they can just turn Gaza into Dresden. Wipe out the people. We'll never know how many are dead in the rubble or how many have rotted or been eaten by dogs. We'll never know. Just buried under the rubble.
Well, they're also, do you see that some of these young influencers from America, they've been sent to Israel for trips, so they can film and they can show, there's plenty of food supplies going into Gaza. I mean, I saw a guy.
Hey, the Nazis had propaganda films from concentration camps showing the happy band player, showing the Jews dancing in the camps, showing how the chow halls are full and the band is playing and, everybody's working at their little nice jobs. So yeah, that's having concentration camps where you make propaganda films about how everything's great and the people are happy. This is like This is like propaganda 101, you know. And like I said, you can show 100 trucks full of bags of flour going into somewhere. You can't live on bags of flour, especially when you've got to, walk miles to find ditch water.
Well, I think the other thing is people, when they bombed the 12-day war, I got so much heat for this because I said I think I wrote on X, but I put on my personal Facebook. I said Trump's presidency ended tonight with this bombing in Iran, and not. My whole point of it was the MAGA people, the MAGA cultists on the right. So, I mean, they're just as bad as the left with some of this because our job is to question, talk about this, be objective, and point out things in our opinion. And I said,
well, I wouldn't say they're as bad in the sense that they're not for like abortion up till birth, and they're not for like, chemically castrating and mutilating children, but they're just as cultish. They're just as like if Trump says we're putting troops in every city, they'll just jump up and salute.
right. That's what I meant by that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And people were giving me I'm like, okay, how do I benefit from this? I'm a guy in Arizona. How do I benefit from dropping bombs in Iran?
No, we're the big dumb organ grinder attached to the little evil monkey. And the little evil monkey, goes out into the crowd and bites somebody, and then he runs back and jumps into the arms of his big dumb master, shrieking about the guy who's coming out of the crowd to grab the monkey because the monkey just bit his damn finger off. But the big dumb organ grinder, Uncle Sam, he says, "Stay away from my monkey." If my monkey bit your finger off, I'm sure he had a good reason. It's like, we're so controlled by that lobby. It's just pathetic. AIPAC, all these politicians, they go to Israel to get their brainwashing propaganda tour, to get their recruitment pitches on the side during luncheons, and then the AIPAC money flows, and Israel can do no wrong. It's pathetic.
And you have these people that like Mark Levine, for example. I mean, just no matter what, it's Israel, Israel, Israel. I mean, look at how I went after Dave Collum. Oh, my friend Dave Collum after Tucker.
It's Israel, and what's his name? Martyr Maid.
Daryl Cooper.
Daryl Cooper, sure. You just can't question the narrative of World War II. And you can't. I mean, Collum was quoting Patton. He didn't say this is what I believe. He was quoting Patton, saying that there were people that had a different idea about World War II. And that maybe World War II could have been avoided if Churchill became like the big hero out of World War II, but from a study of his entire life and the arc of his entire career across both world wars, I mean he was a British imperialist. The makeup of the Middle East was set after World War I. Many of the seeds of many of the future conflicts were made after World War I when that map was drawn up by Britain and France, both going after the oil, and America, but primarily Britain, dividing up the Middle East for its own oil benefits, and then, from Versailles right through to World War II. I mean, the war probably could have been avoided, but the Versailles Treaty put Germany onto an arc where if it wasn't going to be Hitler, it was going to be somebody else. But we probably could have avoided World War II, but we were just completely captured, I think, by British thinking and Britain's goals were imperial goals. They wanted to keep its world empire, and I think America could have been more even-handed and probably avoided World War II. Anyway, it's. But you're not even allowed to talk about that practically. There's like a narrative which is all one-dimensional, and it's so ironic. And I'm obviously not the first to note it. There's so many parallels now between German actions and Israeli actions. The Judenfrei. The maps. When their goal was to drive the Jews out of country after country. It's like Gaza, Arab Fry. The final solution to the Gaza problem. We're going to turn it into Dresden, and the survivors will go to Europe.
But do you think they'll be successful in that though? Or I mean, they haven't been able to do it. It's been almost 2 years.
Yeah, but the a thing about starvation siege is it takes a long time to start. It's like a humongous ship with a small engine, so it takes a long time to get it going, and then it has a lot of momentum, and it's very hard. The kids that are adolescents and children, babies that live in famine times, that barely survive, they're wrecked for life. The siege of Leningrad was like 900 days in World War II, a starvation siege to the point of cannibalism, and that's where you had the Red Army and the KGB, NKVD, brutally keeping order as best they could. They still couldn't prevent cannibalism in Leningrad. That's how bad the starvation was. So for generations after that, you could spot the people who had been children in the siege of Leningrad because they were stunted. They were short. They often had intellectual deficiencies. They had facial characteristics, and you could almost tell what years they had lived through those 3 years of starvation by their effects through their entire adult life. So the adolescents and children in Gaza are not going to just give him a couple great meals and he'll be fine. No, and that's going to be another source of intergenerational anger and hatred towards Israelis, especially when more and more whistleblowers coming out saying we were told to stand down on October 7th. Netanyahu needed his Lusitania, that they knew it was coming. I mean, they created Hamas. That was the most protected border in, a couple miles of border in the world. Watchtowers, cameras, sensors, fences with sensors built in, sensors in the ground, and no reaction for hours. Yeah, so when people are going to lose their last sympathy when the understanding grows that October 7th was green flagged, so that they could turn Gaza into Dresden.
Well, and it seems to me that it appears that he's very desperate right now by doing these media hits, flying all these young influencers over so they can take pictures, and that what it shows me from a public opinion standpoint that he's getting crushed by this.
Well, the polls are the generation, the boomer generation, was raised on the narrative of 1948 and those heroic, feisty Jews came from Europe back to their mother country, even though the Ashkenazi Jews have like no blood from that area. I mean, 2,000 years wandering around Europe. The Bibi Netanyahu has zero genetic DNA from that area. I mean, none. The only thing that he has from that area is a religion. No actual ancestry, no provable ancestry, except in a religious sense. So the movies, the Hollywood movies that were made at that time were, Kirk Douglas and Paul Newman, heroic Americans bringing the guns and kicking out the British and setting up this, these feisty, heroic little Israel in the middle of a hostile desert. They're turning the desert into a garden, and the flowers are blooming and everybody's dancing on the kibbutz. That was the narrative that the boomer generation grew up on. But the younger, the new generations are not growing up on that. They're growing up on, brutality. Gaza, West Bank, Greater Israel. I mean, the Greater Israel thing is not just like some myth. Soldiers wear the patch, but Bibi Netanyahu was on an Israeli talk show where he's sitting in the studio, and they're talking about Greater Israel. He said, I am definitely for the Greater Israel project. And in the original German, that was called Lebensraum. The Germans need living room. We're going to move east because the Untermenschen don't deserve all that great land in Poland and, Belarusia. We're going to take it. That was Lebensraum. Lebensraum is now called Greater Israel. It's an unbelievable turn of events.
That's my biggest concern with all this is that they're going to use that. I mean, you saw I was in LA or Hollywood, the school districts, they can have, they're hanging Israeli flags.
Sure, to prove they're not anti-Semitic. I mean, imagine. But so, and I don't even care. I don't want their problems imported here. Like Michael Yon calls the Ukraine-Russia feud Jurassic Trailer Park. We're importing ancient blood feuds. I don't want it. Let Israel, I would cut off all support to Israel. Israel has a greater per capita GDP than America. The average Israeli has a higher standard of living than the average of American. They should be able to deal with their own problems. And if they can't, then they have to figure out a way to live with their neighbors like every other country on the planet. I mean, imagine just throw a dart at Africa and say, Uganda, you're our favorite country. We're going to pump billions of dollars into Uganda. And if Uganda feels like they've got neighbors that they need to take out, we'll send them arms and we'll back them up no matter what Uganda wants. If Uganda needs to take over a couple countries next to them, we're for Uganda. I mean, what the hell? That sounds nuts. Why would we do that? But we do it for Israel because they're the chosen people. Well, and because we still haven't resolved the entire Epstein thing. Yeah, okay, Jelaine, she's going to say whatever she wants to say. If you're going to be in jail for the next 20 years and you're already, 60, your real reward is going from, federal penitentiary cell block, number 99 to Club Fed on the lake with a golf course and a tennis court. That's as good as you're going to get. So, of course, she's going to say, oh, I never saw Clinton on Lolita Island, and I never saw, of course she's going to say that. She wants to upgrade her living situation for the next 20 years. And Club Fed is a lot better than Cell Block 99. So we still haven't resolved that whole situation. And as far as I'm concerned, the whole Epstein mansion was a honey trap for blackmail video. And where did that blackmail video go? I don't think it went to Langley. I don't think that the FBI has all the copies. I think that stuff was going to the Israeli embassy and has been used ever since. You don't need to control every politician, but if you control, 10% of the politicians, that means you get the key votes when you need them because you can just make a call and, Lindsey Graham, the rumors about his proclivities just make me think, he'll dance to the tune no matter what because they've probably got him on blackmail with the disgusting actions that are rumored.
I wanted to switch. You okay on time?
Yeah.
I wanted to talk a little bit about, we were talking about domestic stuff earlier in the education system, and our friend Matt Smith, his book came out with Maxim and Doug Casey, and we were, I had the opportunity to talk to Maxim a couple days ago, Matt last week, and Doug a few weeks ago, and that's another one of the education system in this country is just they just brainwash you and they turn you into robots, so you don't question.
And debt slaves. They launch you into a life of debt slavery. Through student loans that are granted by the federal government. Yeah, so today's Thursday. Last Friday, we had a lightning storm and my router got nuked through the telephone cable, the telephone line. It didn't affect anything 110 from the outlets, not a glitch, but all the houses around me got their phone lines and fiber optic cables. Those things were all nuked. So I had to wait for AT&T to send a technician out with a new router, which took me from Friday to Tuesday afternoon with no internet. So this happened right during Max Smith's, you know, podcasts and your videos. So there was about a 4-day period where I basically didn't look at the internet. So I can't, unfortunately, I got to go back and watch that and, talk about it after that. But yeah, anything that happened between like Friday and Tuesday, I just basically all I saw was like Fox News. Or that was pretty pathetic. I'm not a cell phone internet person. I don't sit on a cell phone trying to, surf the internet. When my PC tower got nuked, I had no modem. I could put a laptop, I can turn it on, but I had no internet. So I missed the whole Max Smith thing.
Well, it was, Matt said this before, he credits you because Maxim learned how to sail based upon
Yeah.
your suggestion.
He went on a big league sailing trip in the Falklands and Chile, Cape Horn area. Yeah, big league, real ocean sailing. And it's like a teamwork thing. It's like outward bound on to the 10th degree, where you're dealing with professional sailors, big waves, high winds at the ends of the world, the Southern Ocean. So yeah, he saw another chance to use the skills he's learned in other places like firefighting, uh, being a forest firefighter and a paramedic, all of these skills. And I know just living on the ranch, you know about animal husbandry and driving big machines and operating equipment. So yeah, I'm sure he's extremely well rounded for his age compared to going to college and you know
Just being
taking
a robot, just being a robot. Well, even high school. I said, I said to Maxim, I said, when I was 17, 18, all I wanted to do was wait for the hour that the bell would ring, and I had 10 minutes to get to my next class, and I could bullshit with people in between. And college is like a continuation of that.
I think that of course, I went to college in the high school and college that were the first and second part of the 1970s for me. So my high school was 71, 75. My college was 75, 79. So it's all encapsulated in the 70s. But um, I would have to say in college, I was not mature enough for it. I was like 17 when I went to college, out of state to University of Virginia. And it was just a big party. I mean, I did the minimum studying to get by. I had the ROTC, Navy ROTC thing. So at the time I knew, hey, if as long as I graduate, I'll be an ensign in the Navy. It doesn't matter if I have a 4.0 or, it doesn't matter. If I graduate, I'm an ensign. And I was just partying my way through college, girlfriends, booze, parties. Anyway, the people that I thought had a much more serious attitude in college were guys that had done an enlisted tour in the military. So instead of going straight from high school at age 17 or 18 to college and being seduced by the party life, you do 3 or 4 years in the military. You're a lot more mature at 22. When you go to college at age 22, having served in the military, your discipline has already been hammered out. You know how to take care of yourself, dress yourself, get to work on time, all of the maturity angles of adulthood. The military hands you that. And you can prioritize what you want in your life much better at age 22 or so. So, I mean, even for going to college, I think going to college at age 17, 18 is a huge, at least for me and for many, it's not the best time to do it. Do something else, then decide to go to college. So what Maxim's been doing instead of the military, he's been learning all these life skills like EMT, firefighter, ocean sailor, and
Private pilot's license.
and just living on the ranch compared to living in an apartment somewhere. Living on a ranch, you are out in the world. You're dealing with weather, climate, you know, price of everything that goes into running a ranch. Yeah, that's just growing up on a ranch, whether it's in America or Uruguay, is so much more practical living. I mean, there's every farmer knows how to run a bulldozer. Every farmer, you know, when something breaks, you don't call a welder, you fix it. You got a welding machine. You know, farmers are like super rounded individuals. They can't afford to shut down a piece of equipment and wait for somebody to come out and fix it. They fix it. If they don't fix it, their neighbor can fix it.
I was joking around with Matt. I said, I just want a half an acre on your property. And he goes, the funny thing is, if you pick the right half acre, we won't even know you're there.
Right.
That's where we got to go, Matt. We got to go to Uruguay. We're going to set up a camp on Matt's property.
I have actually, it was further to sail from Panama to Hawaii to Guam, and from Guam to California. It would be closer to sail to Uruguay from Florida.
How long would it take?
2 months. But
2
I could
months
do it
just
without
on the water.
stopping.
2 months on the water.
I could do it without stopping.
But you'd be on
I
the
could
water
do
for
it.
2 months, though, is what you're saying?
I've done that before.
No, I know, but 2 months it would take on the water to get to Uruguay.
Yeah, because you've got fuel considerations, and there's doldrums around the equator where you might have to wait for some wind, and you may be short on fuel, so you just can't run the engine for a week, which I have done before, run the engine for a week straight. But then you're out of fuel and you got to go in somewhere. But I might have to stop for fuel in the Caribbean or Brazil or somewhere. But I could leave and next stop Uruguay, maybe figure in a fuel stop somewhere. But 2 months at sea, I've done that. And you can take whatever you want with you. Whereas you can't stick gold bars in your carry-on bag and put it through the X-ray. It's going to be a problem.
How much food would you have to take with you on a trip like that? I mean, how many pounds and what would you take if you were going to do it?
Food is pretty easy. A lot of canned goods, a lot of rice, stuff like that. You can make your own bread on the way, but I always have a fishing line out, and sometimes you don't catch a fish for a week, and sometimes you catch a fish the first hour. I mean, big fish. So, but you have a lot of canned stuff. You start with your freezer completely full of frozen meat, and you bring it onto the boat frozen. So instead of like putting ice blocks in, you fill it with frozen meat, and then your 12-volt refrigeration can keep that. It's not trying to freeze meat. You bring on frozen meat, and then you go through that. But there's a lot of stuff in cans. I mean, you can get bacon in cans. You can get all kind of things you wouldn't expect in cans. Before refrigeration was common, I mean, butter comes in cans. So when you'd think about, ranches out in Australia or somewhere, there's an entire subset of the grocery industry which was all put in cans. All kind of meat is in cans. They put a whole chicken into like a big can, right? There's a whole chicken, pull it out and stick it in a pot. It's better if you're dealing with frozen stuff. But you eat a lot of. But the bulk of it is not that hard. It's not that much volume. So it's 2 months worth of food for, say, 4 people. It's not that. It's a couple big grocery store trips. And when you catch a fish, you have a big feast,
You just bring
fresh fish.
1,000 bottles of water or something?
No, I have big water tanks on my boat. It's a steel boat, so I built it with water ballast tanks so that if I'm leaving for a really major voyage, I can carry almost 800 gallons of water. And if you have both tanks half full, when you're sailing, it's a monohull, so you're leaned over. So the water is on the high side, so you heel less, you're leaned over less. And before you tack, meaning you're going to steer the other way, so you're leaning the other way. Before you tack, you let the water run downhill, the fresh water. So I just carry a lot of fresh water. A lot of people have reverse osmosis systems. So they produce fresh water. You need 12-volt electricity, and you need, obviously you got a lot of salt water, and you need an RO machine that is working well. But most people do that. But since I built my own boat, I just built it with two humongous water ballast tanks for fresh water. But yeah, I can, I've done 60 days at sea before. I've done 40, over 40, over 30, a couple times. Yeah.
Save me a spot. I don't know if I don't know if I'm in your top, you in top three, but you know,
Well, it's just a question of, you know, are you on vacation when something terrible happens and you can't even get to your boat, or somebody stole your boat, or, you know, who knows? There's no guarantees, but I always had in mind that if something happens, I could just get on the boat and cross an ocean. I probably won't go through the Panama Canal. That's a little bit, you know, everything has to be working right socially and economically in the world for the Panama Canal to be a good option. I've done it both ways, but I'm thinking I'm going to be in the Atlantic for the rest of for the duration, north or south. But I could get on the boat and next stop Uruguay. Probably have to stop for fuel.
Matt Smith, if you're listening, we're coming. We're planning it out now to come down to the ranch.
Yeah, and there's other ballast. We can put other ballast on the boat and heavy metals.
I don't bring a lot of value, but I figure if I bring you, like, you know, maybe I'll get a spot on the ranch.
You know, I watched this cheesy Mark Wahlberg, a movie called The Italian Job, and these guys are like handling these big gold bricks like they're styrofoam. You know, lead is like almost twice as heavy as iron, and gold is like 1.6 times heavier than lead. So I always laugh in these movies, even good movies like Kelly's Heroes. Guys are picking up gold bars like, you know, this big. That's like over 100 pounds. That thing right there. It's like 3 times as heavy as iron. I mean, you picture a 50-pound barbell plate, you know, that would be 150 pounds of gold. So anyway, yeah. The only problem with gold is moving it. You know, it's you can't just put it in the you know, customs declaration. It's probably going to get seized. So that's another thing to consider about having a sailboat.
You know, I wanted to take a few minutes and just talk about, because, you know, after our last conversation, you set me on the path for the Clint Eastwood Sergio. Is it Leone or Leone?
I hear it both ways. Usually a little bit of a vowel at the end, Leoning. But yeah.
So you had me on that path to watch the Eastwood ones, and then you know, which is Fistful of Dollars for a few dollars more, The Good, the Bad, the Ugly, and then Once Upon a Time in the West. And I have to tell you, the way I did it, the way you told me to do it, was the best way, because they just get better and better and better. And here's I got so into it that
Clint Eastwood had just come off of being on a black and white TV show called Rawhide. Okay, so he was sort of known from that. And the movie Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, the recent Tarantino movie, is in some ways an homage to Sergio Leone, because he named it's a Once Upon a Time, like Sergio Leone's 3 movies. But in that movie, in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, DiCaprio is like a Clint Eastwood in the sense that he's a washed up black and white TV star who gets.
I didn't even realize it. I didn't even realize that, because
he's a washed up black and white cowboy TV, you know, Bounty Law. So he, you know, Jake Cahill. So of all people, Al Pacino is playing like a TV producer guy who connects him to a Italian director. He says the second most famous Italian spaghetti Western director to go to Italy and make spaghetti Westerns, which launches him, you know, at the end of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. You can see DiCaprio's character was like ready to quit. He's like depressed, never going to work in Hollywood again. So this is very parallel to Sergio Leone and Clint Eastwood, because Clint Eastwood came for free. You know, so Sergio Leone, with these no budget Fistful of Dollars is made on like a zero budget.
You can tell because it's not that long. It's only an hour and
It's
40 minutes.
Yeah, it's got no budget, but it clicked because people had a recognition of Clint Eastwood from the TV show Rawhide, where he's Rowdy Yates.
Do you know what I read about it though, which you'll find interesting? That he originally only wanted Charles Bronson, and Bronson thought it was stupid, the idea. I don't know if that's true or not, but I read that.
Their paths crisscross like this because, so each one of the Leone spaghetti westerns, because the previous success, you can get more name actors and a bigger budget. And by the time he does, everybody's probably seen Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. That's a pretty high budget movie. And
Civil War battle in it. I mean,
oh yeah, it's huge, sweeping. So Sergio Leone leverage, and of course, this is one of those other amazing things. Ennio Morricone and Sergio Leone were in the same grade school class in Italy.
oh, I didn't know that.
So the great film scores of the Sergio Leone movies, like Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, and Once Upon a Time in the West, which I think is his masterpiece.
It is. I would agree with you.
But the soundtracks, I mean, Ennio Morricone would be considered like a great composer anytime, anywhere.
So let me share this with you, which I thought was interesting. And again, I didn't verify it, but Once Upon a Time in the West, they offered the role of harmonica to Clint Eastwood, and he turned it down so he could do the Outlaw Josie Wales, and Charles Bronson then took it.
Right. So these guys, that could have been a Clint Eastwood role, but Bronson also had his own following and his own crazy story about, both of these guys were black and white TV and film guys in the 50s. Bronson in the 50s was in a ton of low budget movies as like a, small role actor. So he was a striving actor, forever. And in the early 70s, Clint Eastwood transitioned out of the cowboy genre, the Western genre, to Dirty Harry. And Charles Bronson did Death Wish, which became like a franchise.
Never saw those.
You never saw Death Wish?
No.
Oh yeah, Charles. It got cheesy. It becomes a franchise and you just milk it. But the original Death Wish was awesome. So, it's a guy who becomes a vigilante after his family. By now it's kind of a cliche story, but it was very radical in the early 70s. Death Wish, very radical, to become a vigilante and go hunting criminals.
So I should add it to my list, is what you're saying?
Oh, definitely. And just to, sometimes you can just follow like these actors, like, from role to role. And sometimes it's just a matter of the guy's already working on another movie or he's already slotted for another movie. So the director has to take another guy, like Charles Bronson is harmonica in Once Upon a Time in the West.
That movie. So two things I want to share with you, because again, I was doing a deep dive, and I think I sent you some of those YouTube videos with Tarantino, because Tarantino calls the Leone, the Dollars trilogy, the greatest trilogy of all time. Well, I didn't realize the beginning of Inglourious Bastards. Did you notice? You saw that, right?
Sure.
The parallel of the opening scene with the colonel that comes in, he ends up shooting. I think it's Liev Schreiber. It's parallel with The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, when Cliff, whatever it is, I can't think of the actor's name off the top, or the actor that played the villain in The Good, the Bad, the Ugly.
Eli Wallach?
No. He was the ugly, the bad. Who was it? Who was
Lee
his?
Van Cleef.
Lee Van Cleef.
Lee Van Cleef.
So that opening scene in The Good, the Bad, the Ugly, Tarantino pays an homage to that scene in Inglourious Bastards in the very beginning. Which and then also Morricone in the Once Upon a Time in the West, because from what I understand, Leone wasn't going to bring him in as the composer, and Morricone pitches this idea of saying, why don't we do natural sounds instead of just a soundtrack? Because the first 10 minutes of Once Upon a Time in the West, there's only like 5 lines of dialogue, but you hear the train, you hear the water drop on the cowboy's hat, the bugs,
the fly buzzing around,
and then he takes the butt of the gun to try to kill the fly, or maybe he does. It's
a masterpiece.
And then I heard
Claudio Cardinale. The whole plot is so great that this woman is going, and for you in Arizona, you don't even know through the movie what the hook is. The water, not to do spoilers because I want to encourage everybody to watch. I think that Once Upon a Time in the West I never even saw it until like a year ago. I didn't even know it
Oh,
existed.
you
Now
just
it's
saw
on
it?
a lot.
You
In like 2 years ago, maybe. And I've seen it 10 times since then.
it's
Every
so
time it
good.
comes on, I'll watch it again. I don't care if it's 2 in the morning. But yeah, it's a masterpiece. And the soundtrack is a masterpiece. But it's for people living in the American West. You don't even know what they're looking for at this deserted desert ranch. That what is it where's the gold? What's the valuable thing? It's the water. And then the ending scene where
Oh,
the train is,
don't say the ending scene. Don't say the just because my mom's gonna listen to
it's
this,
so
and it's
unbelievable
so
that
much
the
better if you don't like. I went into it with a total blank canvas, all of them, and it's so much better if you have no idea about the because. And I even listened to Bill Burr. I love these YouTube reviews because I think I told you Siskel and Ebert when I was a kid was like my favorite show. So they have
Mhm.
like all these little 2 minute clips of Tarantino reviewing films. And I saw one Bill Burr talking about Once Upon a Time in the West, and he said the first 45 minutes you don't even know what's going on. And if you don't know anything about the movie, like what Charles Bronson's role is, you have to watch it to the very, very end to where you're like, okay, now it all comes together, and it's
and him
incredible.
and the way that the theme of water and the theme of trains, obviously it's a Western, so there's horses and wagons and cowboys, but it's trains and water, without doing spoilers. But to me, it's a masterpiece. And there's another uh, Sergio Leone movie with Ennio Morricone, but I think it's kind of flawed with James Coburn. And they gave him different titles, like in Europe and America. It has a retarded title called Duck You Sucker. And James Coburn is an outlaw who escapes from Ireland. He's like an IRA guns and bombs guy who's in the Mexican Revolution in like 1920. So I like the movies that are set in the early 20th century because you've still got a leg in the Westerns. There's horse cavalry and so forth, but there's also like some motorcycles and cars, trucks, um, because it's that transitional technology era. Um, there's another fantastic movie, not a Sergio Leone. I love from that area. What is it? Not The Professionals. What's it? With Lee Marvin, where they're going into Mexico. I think it's also Claudia Cardinale that they think that they're rescuing. What's that called? It might be called The Professionals, where mercenaries are sent into Mexico to bring Claudia Cardinale out, and it turns out she doesn't want to be rescued. But yeah, that's got a huge cast. Burt Lancaster, all these stars, and then there's the what's his name? What's the other big Western director? Was right? Let's see. His first one was Ride the High Country, but he's the film that's also Mexican Revolution era with a ton of stars. What is that one called? I'm having mental blocks.
See, I never saw the Magnificent
No,
Seven.
not the Magnificent Seven. This is
Is that should I add that to my list too?
sure, but I don't think it's that great of a movie.
What about Butch Cassidy?
That's a chick flick.
Hmm.
My sisters all went to see that 10 times because it was uh, Paul Newman and Robert Redford, and they were like, fantasies for the girls.
What about Leone? While you're thinking of that, what about Leone's Once Upon a Time in New York? Is that worth watching or?
I didn't care for it. The Jewish mob in New York from in the middle of the 20th century. Um, it's De Niro and James Woods and some others, but it just didn't do it for me. Let me see. I gotta look. I gotta Lee Marvin movies. I can't believe I'm having a.
Here,
I
I could
gotta
look
do
it
the
up.
film entire
Burt
filmography.
Burt Lancaster, The
The,
Professionals. You already
yeah,
said
the
the
Professionals is
Wild
awesome.
Bunch, Rio
The
Bravo.
Wild Bunch. The Wild Bunch. Oh yes, the Wild Bunch. And that's who's the director there? He was who was the director of the Wild
Sam
Bunch?
Peckinpah.
Sam Peckinpah. And Sam Peckinpah's first movie, where he had just been like a TV director kind of guy, is called Ride the High Country. And that's an awesome movie with a couple of washed up stars. Randolph Scott is a villain. Usually Randolph Scott was a good guy in movies. But yeah, Ride the High Country is a phenomenal movie. And it's also like early, turn of the century. So they've got like a couple of semi-automatic weapons like pistols and I think a Remington #8. So when people say, "Oh, there's semi-automatic weapons," it's like a new thing. Oh, the mass shootings are because they have more firepower now. Semi-automatic box-fed magazines are from like 1905. You know, you could buy them from way back. So yeah, we didn't have mass shootings because the guns didn't change, the culture changed. Anyway, yeah, that's on my list would be Ride the High Country, The Wild Bunch, The Professionals, and the one that's the Mexican Revolution with James Coburn as the Irish guy is Duck You Sucker. And that's Ennio Morricone, but I don't like the soundtrack of it. So that one's kind of like lost. That's just for like total fans of that genre, like, Peckinpah and Leone. You have to watch that one too. It has some really good moments and a big budget, like they can afford to have like, hundreds of cavalry guys in a scene. That takes some doing.
Is it?
And Major Dundee, going back to the Scotland Girl, Major Dundee with Charlton Heston and Richard Harris. Even though they like ran out of money halfway through, so they had to kind of like stitch the film that they shot together, you know. But you can see what they were trying to do is like a huge epic Western.
Isn't it amazing how, these directors like Sergio Leone, I don't think he made another movie after Once Upon a Time in New York, and he died in 1989. He was young, 60. And I think about Coppola. Like Coppola made some of the greatest movies, I mean, before my
Sure.
time of my life.
Apocalypse Now.
Godfather 1 and 2.
If that's all you did, that's enough.
Godfather 3
That's
sucked.
all you did.
Godfather 3 was terrible.
Oh yeah, that doesn't even count. That
Outsiders I
doesn't even
liked.
count.
I mean, maybe because I was a kid when I saw that. But I
And
still,
going to actors, like looking at like starting with because it comes up on TV, sometimes Rawhide. So Clint Eastwood in like 22 years old, 25 years old. He's a black and white, young, handsome cowboy named Rowdy Yates. And you follow him all the way through to Gran Torino and The Mule. And so you can follow the man's whole life through his films. Well, Al Pacino, he was from Godfather and Dog Day Afternoon, and then he shows up in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. So this is like another way of an homage by Tarantino to try to pull these guys in. And in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, the Bruce Dern character at the ranch at the Charles Manson family is living at like a Hollywood Western film ranch, and the guy that owns it is played by Bruce Dern. It was going to be Burt Reynolds. Tarantino wanted Burt Reynolds for that role as like another homage to one of the old great, Hollywood era guys, the big stars. And he died, and so Bruce Dern got the role. And Bruce Dern, if you're a Hollywood Western buff, he was in like 50 great cowboy movies. He's always like the squirrely villain, going back to like John Wayne, the Cowboys. Bruce Dern is in so many Westerns as like a strong supporting actor. And Tarantino fit him into Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Yeah, I do I'm not a huge Tarantino fan for everything he does, but I respect his body of work. Hateful Eight, that's another great one.
it's the only one I haven't seen. I've seen
Hateful
I've
Eight
seen
is,
everything else.
and Bruce Dern's in Hateful Eight. So Tarantino, he likes to bring the old, bring back these like retired former stars and give him a old guy role. Yeah, Hateful Eight is excellent. I really like it.
Django was I like Django, but it was a little over the top.
Yeah, it's like in the Inglorious Bastards vein, over the top is a good way to describe it,
Yeah.
but and I like Brad Pitt in Inglorious Bastards. He's excellent in that. A more serious war movie is Fury. He's excellent in that. He's excellent in F1, which we just discussed a couple weeks ago.
Phenomenal movie. Well, they're
Yeah.
making a sequel. It's filming now. Tarantino wrote a script, and it's called The Adventures of Cliff Booth, and David Fincher's directing it.
Not Tarantino.
Not Tarantino. No, Tarantino wrote the script, and Fincher's directing it. Which Fincher,
I hope it works out because I love that in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I mean, there was like a flashback within a flashback, right? And it's like, how can you pull that off? Where Cliff Booth is up on the roof and he's thinking about what happened with the scene with Bruce Lee.
yeah,
And then in that, he thinks about when he's out on the boat with his wife and the spear gun
Right,
and she's nagging him. And they say to Bruce Lee, that guy, he's pretty famous. Him? Says, yeah, he killed his wife.
yeah.
Got away with it.
I mean, Fincher and Brad Pitt, though, they have a long relationship. I mean, 7, 12 Monkeys.
Mhm.
I mean, Fincher, I haven't seen all of his movies, but I mean, I love Social Network. I didn't like Alien 3.
I think Brad Pitt just gets better and better.
Isn't it crazy how him and Tom Cruise?
And some people say, "Oh, he just plays Brad Pitt," but it's like, hey, it works.
I'm entertained. Well, isn't it
Right.
funny how him and Tom Cruise in their 60s are carrying Hollywood right now? And DiCaprio's
Definitely.
got another movie coming out next month too. I mean, I always like Leonardo DiCaprio, but
Yeah, I respect him, and I think it's so cool in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood that it's also kind of based on Burt Reynolds and Burt Reynolds' longtime stuntman that did all the like car jumping scenes and everything. That Burt Reynolds and his stuntman were like roommates for years, partying, chasing girls, and that was sort of the background of DiCaprio and Brad Pitt. And it's funny because I change these things around all the time, but this was from a ring. I don't know if that shows up, but there's a ring that DiCaprio is wearing in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which is this. It's a real common. It's like a lion head ring. It was smashed, and I had it just welded a thing on to do that. But that lion head ring is DiCaprio wears it in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which I didn't know. I just was like, wow, look at that. It's this thing. Yeah, I guess I'm a movie buff now just by living long enough and appreciating the great directors.
where can people find you?
On X now that I've got a router that works again, but I'm Matt_Bracken48, and you can buy my books straight from me. Here's a couple of them I got laying around here, so I can hold up now and then. But yeah, my books would all be great novels. I mean, if I had a connection with a director or something, these novels would be awesome movies. But it's probably never going to happen. But I mean, I'm like the producer of my own movies when I write these novels. But it's like a one-man show, and it takes me years to do it. But all the scenes are in your mind. All the characters and all the scenes have to exist only in your mind. I wish they would be movies, and that would never happen. But I wish they would be movies. I think they'd be kick-ass.
This is the first time we had solo. We went over 2 hours.
Yeah, just the movies, and it's good we did the movies at the end because people that aren't into movies can just turn it off there.
People get pissed off. People get pissed off. I'm like, relax.
But what a great list of movies. If you haven't seen, The Professionals, The Wild Bunch, Once Upon a Time in the West, Duck You Sucker, Death Wish. I mean, you got to watch these movies.
Well, and I think you said it best. The template for the Sergio Leone is to start with, don't go backwards. Don't start with Once Upon a Time in the West and then go to the Eastwood
That's right.
stuff.
No, you'll be disappointed.
Yeah, because they get
You'll be
better.
disappointed.
Each one gets better and better and better.
His budget and his talent is so much improved all the way through. And I think Once Upon a Time in the West is an absolute magnificent masterpiece.
Well, and the funny thing too about those movies, they're not good guys. Like Eastwood's not a good guy. And here's the other thing too. I know we're ending, but I didn't realize that watching going from For a Few Dollars More to The Good, the Bad, the Ugly is that Lee Van Cleef. I said it right? Lee Van Cleef.
Yeah.
He plays
little cigars.
He plays two totally different roles, and I didn't connect it because I'm watching The Good, the Bad, the Ugly. I'm like, oh, that's his friend. But it's
no, it's a total. It's not really, to me. It's not really a trilogy. To
they're
me,
standalone. They're all standalone.
Well, the $2 movies are. I think they're only considered a trilogy because it's his first three films, and they have Clint Eastwood. Mm. You know, but then Once Upon a Time in the West, he's got. He has Henry Fonda and Charles Bronson and
Jason Robards.
Jason Robards, who's magnificent. Cherokee. Just these are some of like the great actors that never got Oscars. You know.
Well, and also you could make the argument that Clint Eastwood's character, which I thought I heard him call Joe in the Fistful of Dollars, but the other two movies he's not. In the third, Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, Eli Wallach keeps calling him Blondie. But
right.
That character, it doesn't mean that's the same character in each one of those either.
No, it's not the same character at all. I think they're standalone movies.
Clint Eastwood, it's not the same character?
Yeah, and then, I know, they're different movies completely. It's only a trilogy because they're Sergio Leone and Clint Eastwood. The plots aren't continuous. And some of his movies I don't think are that great. High Plains Drifter, some of when Clint started producing his own. Of course, there's Outlaw Josie Wales. He starts like hiring and so did Bronson. It's like you have your girlfriend as like the actress, you know. You're supporting your friends, you know, like let's bring my friends in and make a movie. They're okay, but they're not great. Like the Dirty Harry movies, and he goes off in that genre. But I like Tarantino also for kind of reprising all of these. And in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, he explains how washed up Hollywood actors wind up in Italy or in Spain making spaghetti westerns where they each speak in their own languages, which is why some people sound dubbed and some people don't. I never even knew that except for watching that little bit in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, you know, that DiCaprio didn't like his style of everybody speaks their own language. So you imagine doing a scene with like 4 or 5 people, one guy speaking German, one guy speaking Italian, one guy speaking English, one guy speaking French, and then somebody dubs everything. You know, that's why they seem so quirky to Americans. But Once Upon a Time in the West is all filmed, you know, in English, thank God. And I think it's his greatest work. And Ennio Morricone, I think it's Ennio Morricone's greatest score. For sure.
And each actor, I could talk to you for hours about this. And each actor in Once Upon a Time in the West, the four characters, they all had their own theme music.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, I hadn't thought of that. But yeah, and it's Ennio Morricone. And then you go, what are the odds Ennio Morricone is in grade school with Sergio Leone? And I've only heard this. I don't know. I've never seen any documentation of it. That both of these kids said, if one of us makes it, then we'll help the other guy. They were like friends in grade school. There's pictures of them. They're like 11 years old. Ennio Morricone and Sergio Leone. And you can look it up. There's like black and white school pictures. And they both made it. And they're both like the greatest composer and director.
Matt, I'm sure it won't be that long before we talk again. Maybe we do another one with Jan. I haven't talked to him in a little while. See what's going on with him.
I think he's mostly been in Japan lately.
Yeah, he put a Substack out earlier today, and I was like, God, I gotta ping him just because I haven't chatted with him.
I just can't even keep up. There's so many Substacks coming in, I just can't even keep up. I got to go watch Maxim Smith now. I mean, I lost those like 4 days. It was like 4 days off from internet.
It's probably a good thing, though.
Yeah.
I'm sure it won't be that long before we talk again.
Yeah, until I get a Starlink. Then I can have it on my sailboat.
Mic drop.